What if the secret behind extraordinary wealth was not greed, speed, or luck, but morality? That idea sounds naive in a world obsessed with hacks and shortcuts. Yet one of the richest intellectual architects of modern capitalism believed exactly that. Benjamin Franklin did not simply accumulate money. He engineered a system where character produced capital. The mystery is not that Franklin became wealthy, but how his moral code repeatedly turned discipline into prosperity, while others chased speculation and failed. To understand this, we must look beyond the legend and into the cause and effect story that linked virtue to value. 18th century America was not a land of guaranteed opportunity. It was a volatile economic experiment. Colonies depended on British credit, paper money collapsed regularly, and merchants lived on the edge of debt. Into this unstable system was born Benjamin Franklin in 1706, the 15th child of a candlemaker. No inheritance awaited him. No safety net existed. What Franklin encountered instead was scarcity, risk, and a society where reputation determined survival. This environment quietly shaped his thinking long before his wealth appeared. Franklin's origins matter because they explain his obsession with self-control. Apprenticed at 12, he learned that labor without discipline leads nowhere. When he ran away to Philadelphia, he arrived broke, unknown, and hungry. This was the first causal link in his philosophy. Poverty was not merely lack of money, but lack of structure. Franklin observed that talented men failed not from ignorance, but from disorder. From this insight emerged his lifelong experiment in moral engineering. His rise began not with invention, but with habits. Franklin created a personal system of 13 virtues, including temperance, industry, frugality, sincerity, and justice. These were not abstract ideals. Each virtue served a financial function. Temperance preserved focus. Industry multiplied output. Frugality protected capital. Sincerity built trust. Justice created long-term alliances. Franklin tracked these virtues daily, treating character like an investment portfolio. This was radical in an age where wealth often came from speculation, land grabs, or political favor. The printing business became the laboratory for his theory. Franklin entered a crowded market where most printers failed within years. His competitors drank heavily, missed deadlines, and chased quick profits. Franklin did the opposite. He delivered consistently, charged fairly, and reinvested earnings instead of displaying wealth. Clients noticed. Creditors trusted him. The cause and effect was brutal and clear. Moral reliability reduced risk, and reduced risk attracted opportunity. Over time, Franklin's printing network expanded across colonies, producing steady cash flow rather than volatile gains. Franklin's middle years revealed the deeper mechanics of his approach. As his wealth stabilized, he diversified not through reckless bets, but through information. He studied interest rates, currency shortages, and the psychology of borrowers. In colonial America, paper money was controversial, blamed for inflation and moral decay. Franklin took a nuanced view. He supported limited disciplined issuance tied to productivity, arguing that money itself was neutral, but behavior determined outcomes. This stance earned him influence and enemies. Again, morality shaped credibility, and credibility shaped power. His scientific work followed the same logic. Experiments with electricity were not hobbies detached from economics. They demonstrated method, patience, and public benefit. Franklin published openly, refusing to patent discoveries like the lightning rod. Critics called this foolish, yet the effect was profound. His reputation soared across Europe. When diplomacy later demanded trust, doors opened. The cause and effect chain extended decades. Generosity and knowledge produced leverage in politics. The rise of Franklin as a statesman cannot be separated from his moral branding. In London and Paris, he cultivated simplicity, wearing plain clothes among elites. This was strategic restraint. He signaled independence from corruption and luxury. Foreign lenders and allies perceived him as reliable, not desperate. During the American Revolution, this perception translated into loans, military aid, and patience during delays. Morality here became geopolitical capital. The breaking point returned when Franklin confronted hypocrisy within the new nation. Victory did not erase human weakness. Speculation surged. War debts mounted. States quarreled. Franklin warned against paper promises unsupported by virtue. His later writings grew sharper, almost pessimistic. He had seen the pattern enough times to predict the consequences. When moral discipline weakened, systems strained, regardless of constitutions or slogans. The fallout of ignoring these warnings appeared quickly. Inflation eroded savings. Political factions hardened. Franklin, aging and ill, pushed for compromise, emphasizing humility and self-restraint in the Constitutional Convention. His famous call for daily prayers was less religious than practical. He believed acknowledgement of limits preserved cooperation. Without it, ambition would fracture the republic. Failed fixes followed his death. Leaders attempted to regulate outcomes without cultivating character. Laws multiplied while trust declined. The young nation survived, but cycles of crisis repeated. Franklin's absence revealed the fragility of systems divorced from virtue. His life had been a balancing force, quietly absorbing excess through example. Modern parallels make this pattern uncomfortable. Studies in behavioral economics show that trust reduces enforcement costs dramatically. High-trust firms spend less on monitoring and litigation, freeing capital for innovation. Longitudinal research on family businesses reveals that those emphasizing stewardship over extraction survive generations longer. Conversely, environments saturated with fraud experience capital flight, higher interest rates, and slower recovery after shocks. These are not moral judgments but measurable effects. Digital economies intensify the stakes. Online markets collapse instantly when trust erodes. Reputational damage spreads faster than profit. Algorithms may scale attention, but ethics still govern retention. Franklin would recognize this immediately. The medium changed, the mechanism did not. This repetition across centuries suggests a sobering conclusion. Wealth is not stored only in assets, but in behavior. When behavior deteriorates, balance sheets eventually follow. Franklin's restraint looked slow in his time, just as it looks boring now. Yet slowness was the feature. It allowed feedback, correction, and learning. Fast money silences signals until collapse becomes the only teacher. The first takeaway is simple but difficult. Personal discipline creates economic optionality. Franklin's habits produced freedom before fortune. The second is structural. Ethical systems reduce friction and multiply value beyond individual effort. The third is historical. Every era that abandons moral limits pays later through crisis and correction. The warning is open-ended. History offers no exemptions for intelligence or technology. Each generation believes it has outgrown old constraints, and each eventually rediscovers them through pain. We can ignore these lessons because they sound old-fashioned, or we can test them again in a fragile global economy. Franklin's experiment is unfinished. The question is whether we will continue it or repeat the collapse he spent a lifetime trying to prevent. Franklin would likely argue that the real scarcity today is not capital, but patience. Markets reward noise, yet wealth rewards consistency. The tension between the two defines every era. If this story changed how you think about wealth, question the myths you consume, study the habits behind success, and subscribe for more histories that explain not just what happened, but why. Remember that moral choices compound invisibly, long before results appear, shaping outcomes that seem sudden only to those who ignored the process. History rarely rewards shortcuts, but it consistently rewards those who align character with consequence, always. What is often missing from Benjamin Franklin's story is the uncomfortable truth that his morality was not just personal self-help, but a social strategy. Franklin understood that when individuals normalize shortcuts, lies, and greed, they don't merely fail privately, they poison the entire economic system. He treated honesty, restraint, and reliability as infrastructure, not virtues for sermons. Another ignored detail is that Franklin saw charity and generosity as long-term reputation capital, not emotional kindness. He also recognized his own contradictions, especially later in life, when he publicly opposed slavery, proving that morality, in his view, was not fixed but meant to evolve. Those who refuse to evolve, Franklin believed, eventually become obsolete, no matter how powerful they seem. Franklin never treated wealth as a trophy. He treated it as a responsibility with consequences. That is why he invested in libraries, education, and civic institutions instead of hoarding money for heirs. He feared societies that rely only on laws while ignoring inner discipline, because laws without character create compliance, not stability. This is where his story becomes disturbing for the modern world. Today, corporations and elites ask, is it legal? Rather than, is it sustainable? Franklin would argue that legality without morality always collapses, just slowly enough to fool people. His life forces a question we avoid. When morality interferes with profit, Which one do we sacrifice? And if profit always wins, what remains in the end, real wealth, or just its hollow illusion? This is not a historical question. It is a mirror.